friends, my name is Sarah and today we're talking about Insurgent. If you missed it, I did a review of Divergent earlier this week, so definitely go check that out if you haven't. For everyone who has not read this series or has only read up to this point, I will try to keep things mostly spoiler-free for this book itself, but if you haven't read Divergent yet and don't want any spoilers, then you should probably stop watching right about now. Okay, we good? Alright, let's get started. So when we last left Triss and Four, they had just become factionless after, getting the program out of the computer that was, having all of their friends kill everyone that they knew and loved from abnegation. So now they're sort of wandering and chilling, going, alright, what do we do next? I wound up giving this book 3.5 out of 5 stars, and it was a difficult one to rate for me because the things that I liked about it, I liked a whole lot more than the things that I liked about Divergent, but the things that I didn't like about it, I also disliked a whole lot more than the issues that I had with Divergent. So for that reason, I wound up giving it 3.5 out of 5 stars. Some of the things I really enjoyed about this, again, Veronica Roth's pacing in this book is quite excellent. Even though as far as the content is concerned, this book really did suffer from middle book syndrome for me, the pacing was just as good as it was in Divergent. She really knows how to grab you and bring you in and to, keep you turning those pages so that even though you have a bunch of questions where you're like, what the heck is happening? Why are we doing it this way? You still want to know what is coming next. You'll probably see this theme running through this review and my forthcoming review of Allegiant. The two things that I wound up really enjoying about this series as a whole, aside from the pacing, are the relationship between Triss and Four and the themes and philosophical questions that Roth poses in the story. If you watched my Divergent review, you know that at first I was a little bit wary about them. I wasn't so sure that I thought the development of their relationship was realistic, and then upon further reflection I was like, okay, maybe this took place over longer than like 2 weeks, I can maybe get behind this. Triss and Four's relationship in this book sort of jumped out in front as my favorite thing about this series. And this might be a little bit of a controversial opinion, but I don't really like Triss that much as a character. She was okay in the first book, but in this one, she gets super whiny, and it felt very much like the angst that Harry Potter has in Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince, and I was just like, oh, come on, girl, get over yourself. But I realized I was still very invested in the relationship between Triss and Four, and I realized that I don't so much like Triss on her own. Like, by herself, I could take her, leave her, whatever. But I really love who she is when she's with Four. And there are a lot of dumb things that she does in this book in particular that you are just like, come on, girl, what the heck are you doing? And I realized after like the second or third idiotic thing that she does that the reason I was so, come on, girl, what are you doing? Is because I was like, dude, you're gonna screw up this relationship with Four. And that was the thing that I didn't want to happen. Like, probably she's the protagonist, so she probably shouldn't die or whatever, but I mostly didn't want her to totally screw up this relationship that Roth was building with Four, because I really loved how in this book they continue to recognize that they need to rely on each other and they can't do this on their own. And that's something that Four seems to grasp a bit more as a character, that they work best together and not when they're individually doing these acts of bravery. And that theme is something that you really see played out through this book in particular. The major theme that Roth really brings to the forefront in this particular book that she sort of alludes to in the first book but doesn't really discuss in detail is this idea that people are just people, that we're all made up of a bunch of different values and characteristics, and it's when all of those different things come together in individual human beings that we're at our best. And she alludes to this a little bit in the first book when Four has the conversation with Triss where he says, he doesn't want to just be one thing. He wants to be, selfless and kind and brave and knowledgeable and honest. And that for me was the central theme that Roth really, really delved into in this book. And you see it in a lot of different things that happen. You see it in conversations that Triss has with Christina. I think that's a thought process that the series as a whole sort of, maybe that's the overarching thing, is, you know, each of the books talks about how, you know, one choice does this thing to you. And I think in some respects it can, but really the theme or the idea that I have started to pull from this is that it's really dangerous when we value one thing over the other. And when we value one thing over the other, you wind up with all of these people who are fighting because of such differing opinions. And I loved that this book really highlights the fact that people are just people and they're meant to be just people. And, you know, those different characteristics and values and a desire for honesty and selflessness and bravery can all coexist in one, you know, person. And I love how Roth really, really brought that topic of discussion and theme to the forefront. So my biggest issue with this book was the same kind of issue that I had with Divergent, which is, oh my gosh, so many holes in this world. And in the first book, you can kind of get away with it because, you know, it's the first book and you're trying to, like, you know, get the plot really rolling but not give too much backstory and all this stuff. But this is kind of the situation where you want to start getting more backstory and knowing why we're doing these things and where this world came from and all this stuff. And she just, she does not do that. Like, we still don't really know what being a Divergent means. There's still, you know, we're starting to see that there are more of them and that they're in some way apparently a threat, you know, to this thing that Janine has sort of set up and everything. But we don't really know why or how someone becomes Divergent or what's the big deal about being more than one thing, about what's the big deal about being something other than, you know, the value that a particular faction highlights. With any series, world building, you know, is important, even if it's set in this, you know, normal world. But with a dystopian novel like this, where you're creating the whole world, it is vastly more important than in a lot of other stories. And I think if the world was built better, if there weren't so many questions about how things work and why things are that way and why do we even care and how do they even get inside the wall and all of these things, that I would have loved this story a lot more. My general thought on the book was like, it had so much potential. Like, you know, the things that I liked in Divergent got better in this book, but then the things that I didn't like also got worse. And that's really hard as a reader because you want to like the story, you want to, you know, love it and all of these things. But when you have so many questions, it's really, really hard to, you know, sink into the story. And even though the pacing of it was, again, really excellent, I found myself, as I was reading it, asking a lot of questions and not really feeling like I was getting any answers. So there you have it, friends. Those are my thoughts on Insurgent. If you've read the book, I would love to hear your thoughts and opinions in the comments. Please let me know what you think of Tris and Four, of their relationship, of them as individual characters, the themes and philosophical questions that Roth discusses in the story, the world building, the pacing, anything and everything that I discussed, or anything and everything that you noticed when you were reading the story that maybe I missed. If you want to find me elsewhere online, you can follow me on Twitter at Sarah Ann Hayes, on Instagram at Sarah Ann Hayes, and my blog is at sarahanhayes.com. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed hearing my thoughts on Insurgent and the continuation of the Divergent series. Be sure to check back on Friday as we finish it up with Allegiant. Thoughts are hard. Why is middle book syndrome? Why are middle books so hard to describe? Oh, really, or just low-key? You need to stop running around because you're making noise. Really brings to the forefront in this book that she talks, oh my gosh, cat.